Hello, everybody. Zoom out, zoom in to the Earth. I'm astronomer Stuart Taylor, suggesting that people zoom out away from the Earth to zoom in to look at the Earth to get the best perspective of the Earth. I've studied exoplanets for the purpose of getting the best perspective of how can humanity, how can all of us that are living on this Earth best treat this Earth, best treat each other to have the best possible future. By studying exoplanets, we can study issues like climate change, and we can learn how planets interact with various effects. Granted, we only know of one planet that has any sort of life at all. Well, maybe Mars, there's some evidence, but nothing like the Earth. The Earth is the only planet in the solar system to have trees. And granted, it will be a long time before we find another planet with a technological civilization and all the challenges that puts on this wonderful thin biosphere of the Earth. I'm starting this podcast for the purpose of discussing planets, the Earth, and humanity. And also as part of my participation with Dr. Jonathan John of our Humanity's Message to the Stars project, of composing messages to the extraterrestrials, taking the perspective of what would we want extraterrestrials to know about us, to know about this Earth. But of course, we use this perspective for a message that will be of most value to, well, first we think of our descendants. It'll be of greater value to them as a historical record of who we think we are today. But it'll be of most value to us, ourselves, to think how we can present ourselves both to other extraterrestrial civilizations, and how would we want to present ourselves to descendants from the perspective of looking away, stepping back, like the astronauts on Artemis currently are doing, recreating the wonderful perspective of when the Apollo 8 astronauts saw the Earth from distant space. How we realize this planet is much more fragile than we otherwise assume. And how humanity is much more fragile. And that's an issue that when we prepare messages for civilizations far, far away, many light years away, and probably not the few light years of the nearest stars. The nearest star is 4 light years away. Within 100 light years, there's a few more stars, but still not so many. And even not that many within 1,000 light years. Us astronomers, we don't consider it that likely that we'll find. We may find a few habitable planets similar to Earth, but will we find a technological planet like ours? Our best guess is that there might be a few planets like that in our whole galaxy, if we're lucky. There might have been a few in the past, and there might be a few in the future. And the galaxy, with a diameter of 100,000 light years, to have any sort of communication back and forth, even at the speed of light, remember that the galaxy is 100,000 light years across. So if we're in a different neighborhood of the galaxy slightly, we're talking light travel distances, radio travel timescales of tens of thousands of years to travel tens of thousands of light years across the 100,000 light year diameter, well, a significant fraction of the 100,000 light year diameter of the galaxy. So this naturally brings up, will humanity still be here? Will our descendants still be here tens of thousands of years from now? And a lot of people assume, no, I would like to hope we've got some choice in that. And that's the important thing when you start considering, will humanity survive, is that humanity has a choice. And that's why the perspective, taking the perspective from far away is important, because we have choices about how we prepare for our future. And that's something that makes this humanity's message to the stars so significant, is we start thinking about all the many things that have changed our past, changed our history, and changed our future. And people in the past, they didn't know how well things that they set up would survive. And they've done remarkably well for setting up a lot of governmental systems, from the setup of democratic nations to the setup of the United Nations, setup of international law, world order, and introducing ourselves to other civilizations. We begin to realize how important these things are, how important good governance domestically of each individual nations, but also good international governance is essential. Because if you think about, what if we do something wrong? What's the chance of us not surviving climate change or nuclear war? Or will AI do anything? If there's a very small chance of ourselves destroying ourselves each year, well, then what is the chance of our destroying ourselves each year? If the chance is small of destroying ourselves each year, but if it's 1%, that adds up. And this is an exponential thing. So the survivability equation for ourselves would be, it would be surviving minus the cumulative possibility of destroying ourselves. And the cumulative possibility of destroying ourselves is an exponential equation. And if we allow humanity to deal with very many, say, Cuban Missile Crisis or accidental likely destruction of the Earth by humanity, or having to go through global warming, that can add up. So when presenting ourselves to extraterrestrials, the question people often think is, will humanity still be there? And when you talk about will we still be here in 10,000 years, really the important thing is, can we survive the next 1,000, or more importantly, the next 100, or the next generation? And can we set up, the challenge is, can humanity set up an international system to more reliably survive the next generation? And that's why international rules, international order, and national order, national protection is so important. And so that's the purpose that I'm wanting to start a podcast. And I appreciate colleagues, especially Jonathan Jung, starting a podcast where we discuss things. In Chinese, we often say, when we introduce a podcast, Da Jia Hao, meaning everybody, hello. And so I'm going to be saying everybody goodbye, but I want to bring up the next podcast that I want to do. I want to go to the World War I Museum here. I'm recording from Kansas City, Missouri, United States, Earth. The World War I Museum memorializes a war where many people died for the purpose, a very clear purpose, to make the world safe for democracy, to make the world safe for the sort of survivability that we worked hard and we kind of forgot right after World War I, but we didn't forget so much after World War II, when we realized how we forgot after World War I. But so then we set up international law, United Nations. We set up international standards, just like we set up standards that we should follow here in the United States for good governance and international good governance, and even rules for war and important things like that to avoid the Holocaust, the destruction the complete Holocaust that's potential if we have the horrible nuclear war. That was 1945, the time of us physicists, we say we know sin, because when you realize the destructive power of an atom bomb or of a hydrogen bomb, of the power of fission of atomic nuclei, or even worse, fission of atomic nuclei going apart, or fusion of protons combining with other protons and neutrons, the tremendous amount of energy released and the tremendous radioactivity could destroy this thin biosphere. Oh, we say save the Earth. Actually, we were trying to save the biosphere. The Earth will survive as maybe a Mars or Venus-like rock. No problem. But whether the biosphere will be able to support humans is the big question. And the other existential issue that we're working on is climate change. I'd like to appreciate Jonathan John for exposing me to the concept of great filters, the great filters that may have caused other civilizations to not survive. And the great filters the question is, how often do humans survive these great filters and fulfill the destiny of the Drake equation, make that the lifetime term, the great Drake equation, long enough that we could actually find civilization. And maybe it's a little worrisome that we don't detect any other civilizations out there. Maybe they don't survive. Fortunately, I can tell you as an astronomer, the distances are so huge, the signal could be so weak and so dispersed, and come with such difficulty of time. Time is also, it's not just distances, time is also huge. The universe being 13.67 billion years, the Earth in a solar system of, say, over 5 billion years, the Earth itself 4.5 billion years old. So we just may be missing the signals. We don't have to presume that not hearing anything, that civilizations don't survive, but they need to do better than we're doing now. The great filters may catch us. And quite honestly, I'm mostly worried about the great filters of destroying ourselves on purpose through anger or through environmental destruction. But of course, the other filters, we don't really know how bad AI is, but we need to take AI seriously. We need to take pandemics seriously. We've survived pandemics before. That one we can probably make it through. And there's a few other things. One thing that should give hope is that NASA has actually taken a big step within the past few years of actually redirecting an asteroid. Asteroid is a big worry. Well, actually, it's not. It would be a big worry if it's headed toward us. Volcanoes may be a bigger worry. So if people say climate change is natural, actually that's missing the point. If it may be very natural for an asteroid or volcanoes to destroy us, if an asteroid's headed this way, I don't really care that much that it's natural. I want to give it a shot. And so the DART redirection mission gave a very significant input. So I do want to go to the World War I Museum. Don't know how well the wind will be doing a video recording, but that's very important. We forgot the lessons of World War I after World War I. We forgot the lessons of before. The US didn't join the League of Nations, and those sort of things, too much retaliation. World War II, the United States started the Marshall Plan. We remembered the lessons of World War I. But over the long term of the Cold War, when we fought authoritarian regimes, have we forgotten? Have we forgotten the lessons that we remembered at the end of World War II? So let's try to remember. That's the reason that the World War I Museum was built. Of course, the building of one beautiful monument museum isn't the important thing. The important thing was the sacrifice of those soldiers, but not just of soldiers having to fight and shoot each other. I've learned that the real sacrifice is sacrificing our comfort, sacrificing our anger, sacrificing our better impulses, because we fought World War II, we fought the Cold War mostly without shooting each other. Granted, many people did, and we're not sure what the best lessons are from the Korean Vietnam War and other events. And I wonder if, and we're having to fight for our freedom. Certainly fighting, I wish that we had tried to handle having nuclear weapons spread to North Korea and possibly Iran. We could have handled that with more diplomacy. But I respect the sacrifices of soldiers who are fighting, and whatever soldiers, we have to remember the soldiers of other countries that have also fought. The bravery of NATO soldiers and our non-NATO allies, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and too many countries that we may forget to remember, Philippines, that we've come together, and that's where things work the best. And so I hope to bring the world together. I hope to occasionally speak in Chinese, say Da Jia Hao, hello everybody. Go up to if you wanted to speak to some Chinese, so I've also tried doing a little comedy. You could make a lot of Chinese tourists really laugh if you just go up to hey everybody, Da Jia Hao. Or if they're from Hong Kong, you can say Da Ga Ho. So that's being a great comedian. And I will have to tell you, my experience of asking some Chinese tourists they weren't being all that quiet at World War I Museum. They just didn't realize it's kind of like a cemetery. And I went and expressed this, and I was able to say it in Chinese. It was kind of helpful, and they really listened to me carefully. And then they really got up and respectfully said, in a moderately projecting voice, but very respectful, said this, our foreign friend has asked that we talk a little quieter. This is like a cemetery. And the way they said that, realized that World War II was fought, Chinese and Americans together. And those Chinese knew that history. We sometimes forget that the United States, by putting sanctions on the horrible imperial Japanese government, we scared the government that was perpetrating all these atrocities in China and destabilizing the democratic Chinese government of the Republic of China, Sun Yat-sen's government. That had been a bit hijacked by Chiang Kai-shek, not very democratic president, but that's besides the point. We can argue that point. It was still the nationalist government had been established by Sun Yat-sen, the great Dr. Sun, who took many of his ideas from his young years, his youth time spent in Hawaii in the United States. That the United States did provoke the imperial Japanese government such that that government attacked Pearl Harbor. And I don't want to laugh too much about surprising us at Pearl Harbor, because the Japanese people and government have been among the stalwarts of the Cold War and standing for freedom and having a democratic government now. And I will say about that nationalist government of China, that the nationalist government did blossom into a democracy in Taiwan. And I saw the island of Taiwan And whatever the disagreement is, whether, perhaps it's a nation province or province nation, but certainly a wonderful community of a real democratic community of a country in an important sense that may be a country of China, and it is very Chinese, but it's very democratic, shows that democracy in fact does work in China, and many Chinese do want democracy. And in some ways, the way the government there does have some emphasis on competence and capability and success. The Chinese may have some reason to look at the messy democratic experiments and wonder that they don't want to copy exactly. Well, of course, Chinese, you don't want to copy exactly how we've done it. You can improve. And I think the United States, when we set up having a constitution with amendments, the founders knew that we would want to change things, and that should be how it is. So I'll need to be doing a lot of cutting and pasting, and I hope to work more with Jonathan Jiang and some of the good colleagues. We've got a great group of people to work together on preparing humanity's message to the stars. Many subjects. I'm promoting that the survival of humanity be an essential subject that we promote. I do want to give a shout out to the fact that there are starting to be quite a few truly exciting institutes on humanity's future being started, and I hope to visit the one at Arizona State. I've seen that there's one at the University of Chicago, the Institute of Human Future. I didn't quite prepare to remember that, but anyway, there's been a lot start on the west coast of the United States, in California, and hope to visit them sometime. And this one has also got an important start in the UK. So while the UK has kind of been ahead, I certainly think that you wonderful German, and I'm sure glad to have a closer relationship between I'm more than 1/4 Swedish, and so I'm very biased in favor of the Nordic countries. Sweden, Finland, they call Scandinavia sometimes. Finland's not Scandinavia, but they're Nordic. And those Northern European countries have been so responsible for the Earth. So I'm sure that they'll be starting. I'd like to promote they start one. I'd like to see Asia start one. Taiwan, why don't you start one for your country, whether your country is China or Taiwan. And in many ways, your country will always be China. Even if you're a country within a country, you're a country with a wonderful democracy, and you show that all of China, and I'm sure that there will be developments in China, and I encourage more freedom in China, and I would love to see a Human Futures Institute being started in China and in Japan. Hong Kong is definitely not its own country all alone, but it's a country within a country of a sort of sense. The one country, two systems. I hope that China lives up to making it really its own system. And Hong Kong would want to continue what it wants, what the people want to continue, even past the 50 years. But we got to keep the word. The current arrangement is not the true one country, two systems. But I do not promote an independent Hong Kong. I will say that, and I hope that all Hong Kongers, and I am grateful to have Hong Kong residency. I'm grateful to the government, thankful to the wife, Hong Kong citizen, and helped me get Hong Kong residency, just as she has U.S. residency, and I'm glad that the U.S. has many immigrants, that we've shared part of the United States. Very many other wonderful countries, Korea, Australia, Indonesia's shown a wonderful democracy. Vietnam, you do a little better on some of your freedoms, but you progressed. And Philippines, some of the freedoms for democracy, I admit I'm not a fan of your former President Duterte, but hey, President Marcos seems a little better than his father. His father was, that's the thing that we worry about in democracy, is trying to continue a presidency beyond legitimacy, and that's what happened in the United States in 2020, trying to not recognize peaceful transfer of power. That was the least peaceful transfer of power that the United States has ever had. And unless you want to, maybe there'd be some argument over the Civil War. That was not a fully peaceful transfer of power. So, and I admit I have some politics I want to encourage with that. I went to join a No Kings protest with my personal promotion of a No Kings, No Puppets protest, because I think Americans need to protest. Protest the puppets. Protest the puppets in Congress, in the Missouri legislatures around the country, Texas legislature, that are doing this unfair anti-democratic redistricting. I like to promote the idea that California perhaps could explicitly condition its redistricting such that it could, maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger we could join in this, that the redistricting would go away, but that we challenge the Californians, and I've been a Californian up until around 2010, voting in California, that we could challenge Texas and the other states, and that we could come up with some way of making the redistricting conditional such that we have more of a shared representation. And I would like to, even among shared representation, I would like to see voting be done in such a way that every person's vote can count, and not just take the winners of which candidate or which party, but there are a lot of voting reforms, ranked choice voting, that need to be considered, so that our representatives need to represent all of us, certainly represent both sides. And when I grew up, I remember people saying that the parties were too similar. No, I don't think the parties were too similar back then. I think back then I thought, well, maybe it's because they both agree on what's right. And I think as a high schooler, I had the right idea that it was good that the parties were similar, because we've seen that they can be different in ways that are not good. So I have to do some editing. Looks like I'm up to about a half an hour. Thank you, and I'll be talking about this later. And Daja goodbye. And peace on earth, success for the survival of humanity. And emphasizing the perspective. Let's all imagine the perspective of the future, of our descendants. Not just zooming out in space, but zooming out decades from now, hundreds of years aloud, like the Native Americans who would try to consider what would the next generation think. Like in Japan, how they have representatives, they appoint representatives to represent people from the next generation. Let's be a more enlightened generation, and let's set some good standards. So, Daja hello, Daja goodbye. I'm Stuart Taylor, the astronomer, with Participation World Scope, emphasizing inclusion, emphasizing participation. Thank you, and this is 1/2 an hour. I enjoyed talking to you, talking to the world. Goodbye.